Committee from Florida. First, Senator Scott, welcome. How fares the state of Florida in the aftermath of Ian?
Well, it's tough. We've lost a lot of lives. There's still rescue efforts going on. There's search and rescue still going on. I'll be in Lee County today, again in the Fort Myers area. It's tough. We lost, unfortunately, many people, many homes, many businesses. But there's people coming together. Everybody's helping. We got the Red Cross here, the Salvation Army here. We got volunteers from all over the country here. Everybody's pitching in to make sure we get this corrected and get people back to work and get people back into their homes.
Very glad to hear it. Senator, my pal Mike Gallagher is raising funds for the relief down there. So on the next show, he'll be talking about that. I want to run through the Senate map with you, Senator. I was going to start with the 5 must-holds by Republicans, but let's start with the would-be Republican takeover in Georgia since Herschel Walker's in the news. Is Herschel Walker's campaign damaged by the abortion story in the Daily Beast or the angry tweets by his son?
Well, look, this is just textbook 101 for the Democrats. They know they're going to lose. Herschel Walker's running a good race. He's a great candidate. Raphael Warnock is Joe Biden. It's just this lies, cheat, and smear. That's what the Democrats do. They did it to Brett Kavanaugh. They did it to Clarence Thomas. They're doing it to Herschel Walker. But he's going to win. And so we're going to win in Georgia.
The Daily Beast story might fit into that category. Do the tweets from his son matter?
No. I mean, what people are going to vote about? They care about is Herschel or Raphael Warnock going to be better for the economy, for your kids' education, for public safety, for a secure border, for our lethal military? It's a pretty easy choice. It's easy to pick Herschel Walker over Raphael Warnock.
Now, let me run down the 5 Republican-held seats that Democrats had a hope for at some time or another. Alaska, Lisa Murkowski. Missouri, where Eric Schmidt is ahead. Ohio, where J.D. Vance is ahead. He's coming in here later. Pennsylvania, where Dr. Oz is at least tied and surging. North Carolina, Ted Budd. Where are you putting most of your resources? I think they're all locked up, but you tell me.
Well, first off, Eric Schmidt's way ahead. All right. We're going to win Alaska. Next, Ron Johnson. People talk about Ron. Ron's never been ahead in the poll ever. He's ahead.
Yeah, I know. I didn't even have him on my list because he's winning so big.
Yeah. I mean, Oz is running a great race. He's either tied to barely down. He's surging. People aren't going to vote for Fetterman. Democrats don't even want to spend money in North Carolina because they know Sherry Beasley cannot beat Ted Budd. So we're going to be able to defend our 50, right? And then we've got 2+ pickup opportunities. We'll win in Georgia. We'll win in Nevada. We have a chance to win in Arizona, Colorado, Washington, New Hampshire, Connecticut. Now, the logical ones are Arizona. Look at Joe Day. Joe Day's down 1 right now to Michael Bennett, who ran for president. Nobody even knows.
Yeah, I think actually
Smiley barely down 2.
I think Colorado is the biggest sleeper, Senator. I follow it very, very closely. And Joe Day's a wonderful candidate. I mean, you did a great job in recruiting him. Let's go that list again because I don't have Connecticut on any list, so I want to hear that. But I think top to bottom, the likeliest pickup is Nevada.
Number 1 is Nevada. Number 2 is Georgia. Okay. Number 3 would be somewhere between Arizona, Colorado, and Washington. They're all winnable. And we got great candidates. Joe Biden's under 40 in all those states, and our Democrat opponent is way under 50. We've spent money early in to find them. So Bennett's about the mid-40s in approval. Patty Murray's in the same position. We've got Mark Kelly at about 47% approval. So, and they're known now. They're known for an open border. They're known for inflation. They're known for critical race theory. And they're known for all this wasteful spending. So that's going to make it hard for the Democrats to win. We're raising our resources. Our candidates are running good races. We're going to win.
Now, in terms of that, when will you look for early? If Pennsylvania comes in for Oz early, and by a significant margin, do you expect the night to be just a replay of 1980?
I think it's good. Yeah, I think there's no energy on the Democrat side. It's like Hillary Clinton. There was no energy for Hillary Clinton. There's no energy for Joe Biden's agenda. So here's what they have to do. The only way they can possibly win is just smear the living daylights out of our candidates. So that's what they do. They talk about the issues that people are not their big issues. Their big issues are inflation, the economy, their kids' education, public safety. Crime is a big issue in these states. And so the Democrats are on the wrong side. They've supported defund the police. They're anti law enforcement. So we're on the right side of all these issues. The Democrats are on the wrong side. So I think we're going to have a great night.
Senator Rick Scott, always good to check in with you. Thank you, especially in hopes and prayers for the recovery effort in Florida. You're a good senator. You've done this before as a governor, and you know the challenge that Ron DeSantis is facing right now. The president will be in Florida today. They'll put aside their political differences, right?
Absolutely. We want everybody to work together, state, local, and federal. Let's help all these families that are hurt.
Thank you, Senator Scott. I appreciate your making time this morning. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm coming back in the next hour. Well, maybe it's hour 3 today. I'm talking to both. No, I talked to J.D. Vance next hour, Dr. Oz in hour 3. So you get one Senate candidate per hour. Don't go anywhere. Hugh Vance is going to be the next senator from Ohio. He joins me this morning. Good morning, J.D. How are you?
Good, Hugh. How are you?
I'm great. Now, J.D., I'm a civilian. You're a Marine. But I read a little bit of military history, so I know the one thing you don't want to do is when you're winning is lose discipline. You don't want to romp into the baggage train like Prince Rupert and end up getting beat on the field. So you're winning. Republicans are winning across the country. How do you maintain good order and discipline as you march forward? Because you got to run through the tape.
I don't think it's that hard, Hugh. You just have to be very focused. And the last month of a campaign season really does that to you. I think when I think about things that we could screw up, one is we got to keep the fundraising momentum because obviously Tim Ryan and a lot of the other national Democrats are raising a lot of money from their small dollar digital operation. So we got to make sure we keep the fundraising momentum. And the second thing, Hugh, is we got to make sure in these debates that we prosecute the case smartly, that we don't make any stupid mistakes. But we had some good Republican primary debates. I'm not worried about that. And like you said, I think we are winning. I think we'll keep the momentum, and hopefully we can expand the lead a little bit here in the next month.
It's interesting, JD, about debates. I moderated a GOP Senate debate in Ohio last year. I noticed at that time you stay incredibly focused. You never go over. You answer the question, and then you always make sure to turn to hit a focused issue. That's like Yale Law School must have taught you something.
I don't know. Yale Law School gets crazier and crazier. But no, it's definitely the thing that I try to do in debates, Hugh, is I try to answer the question. I think that, I've watched enough political debates until this season, of course, I've never participated in any myself. But, these people have their canned lines, they have their slogans, and it's, of course, okay to have a theme that you want to hit, to make a point that you clearly want to make for voters. But I think you should have enough respect for people to actually answer the question they ask you. That's what I try to do.
Hugh, at debate coach mode on right now. If one of your moderators becomes blocking and tackling a guard or tackle for Tim, don't get mad at Tim, get mad at the moderator. And don't get mad. Just say, Hugh, if that's the moderator, I understand your question is designed to embarrass me and to help Tim out. I get it. The media is for Tim. But here's the have you had to do that yet?
No, we haven't had to do that yet. We definitely give it back to the media if we feel like they're asking a fair question. I'll say, look, I don't accept the premise of that question, and let's actually talk about what really happened. So we'll definitely do that in the debate if we have to. I think they do have a couple of pretty fair moderators that they've selected for the next debate in Cleveland. Then we have one not far from your hometown on the 17th in Youngstown. So I think we're going to have good debates. Hopefully the moderators will keep everything in check. The format of the next one is pretty interesting, Hugh. So instead of doing the classic, 60 minutes for a response, 30 seconds for a rebuttal, they're just spending 5 minutes on each topic, and I think they're designed to allow us to spend a fair amount of time on each issue. We'll see how it looks in practice, but I'm pretty excited about it.
Well, let's see if you've got a Chris Wallace sitting there who becomes the debate, a third participant. Happened in Nevada this week when John Ralston got in between, and obviously a Democrat fighting for the Democrats. We'll see. But it's interesting to me they're doing the debates in the northeast of Ohio. Now, Middleton is where you're from. Steel towns. So you're up in the Steel Valley. Cleveland, of course, is steel and car town. I'm glad they picked that turf. That's where Democrats have to win by a lot. If you get attention and hold down turnout, you'll help the ticket up and down throughout Ohio.
Yeah, that's right. And, obviously the Youngstown area has trended more and more red over the last 20 or 30 years. I think really accelerated. So hopefully we can perform well on Tim Ryan's turf. I think that we will. We wanted to do a debate in the Cincinnati area, which is obviously, where I'm from and where I live now. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out. The timing's a little tight on a campaign, and unfortunately that location just didn't work out.
So, JD, closing kick. I'm writing a column for the Post. It seems to me that the issue set that people are talking about are inflation, crime, the border, education, sometimes China. Democrats want to talk about abortion. The voters don't. I mean, activists do, pro-choice rights activists want to, but the voters don't. They want to talk about inflation, groceries, gas. I don't know what gas is doing in Ohio right now. Have I got it right? Inflation, crime, the border, education in China.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that we actually we're in Cleveland right now. We're doing a bunch of campaign events in the Northeast and Central Ohio today. And on the way up here last night, I noticed gas was $4 a gallon at a gas station we drove by. The first time I've seen that actually in the state of Ohio in at least a few weeks, maybe even longer than that. So things are starting to tick back up, unfortunately, on the gas front. I think that will obviously be bad for the Democrats politically. Certainly the border issue, the fentanyl crisis, and a ton about crime. I mean, just from suburban voters, I hear a ton about the lawlessness on American streets. It's a big issue, and it's not just here, in the Cleveland area or the Cincinnati area or the big cities. Findlay, Ohio, one of the great and beautiful small towns in our country, now has a major chronic homelessness population, a major drug problem because of what's gone on the last couple of years. In Findlay, 400 chronically homeless folks in the streets of Findlay, at least 100 of them typically sleeping outside in any given night. I just heard that from law enforcement a couple of days ago. It's really bad out there, even in some of our most idyllic and most prosperous small towns. So we've got a problem to deal with, and I think that because of that, Republicans are going to get rewarded in November, and then we have to do something with it.
JD, there's a big issue brewing in America. In Arizona, Doug Ducey in the Arizona legislature led the way to make school funding follow the student, whether they choose a public school, any public school, a private school, or homeschooling. The funding follows the student. That's not a federal issue, except the federal government can screw that up if it wants to. Will you be pledged to assist any state that wants to make the transition to freedom of choice in schooling?
I will, and there's a big movement here in Ohio. Our mutual friend Aaron Baer and a lot of other folks are trying to get a backpack bill passed in the state of Ohio. I'll certainly support it for my platform in the Senate, and hopefully, like you said, ensure the federal government doesn't screw this up. I will say, Hugh, one of the ways in which the federal government really screws up education right now is that it provides effectively, no questions asked funding to a lot of these very radical organizations that are pushing the critical race theory, the critical gender ideology into American schools via the curriculum. So we're funding the curriculum development that our parents are most upset about. I think at the federal level, we have to start doing something about that. And like you said, keep the local governments engaged in this issue, because I think parents are really taking power back, and we have to ensure that momentum continues.
Yeah, people see the wave coming. They don't see the undertow. The undertow is going to grab school board members who have been presiding over failure for too long and sweep them out to sea. JD, let's close. Your website's the easiest one in the campaign, jdvance.com. Am I right?
That's right, Hugh. Yeah, that's where people can support us. We're going to post a good fundraising quarter. Hopefully, we can get the momentum through October. If people want to support us or volunteer, jdvance.com is the place to go.
JD, keep coming back. Good to talk to you, sir.
Thanks, Hugh. Take care.
Thank you. Studio North, joined by Dr. Oz, who is surging ahead in the Pennsylvania Senate race and turned in a pretty amazing fundraising number yesterday, $17 million. Good morning, Dr. Oz. Welcome back to the program.
Good morning. It is going well. And part of the reason is that the folks in Pennsylvania have begun focusing on the issues that we always knew they would: the kitchen table problems, issues around crime, lawlessness with drugs, the economy, topics that we eventually have to make decisions based on. And my opponent's efforts to make this all about personality are flailing, which is why I think we're doing so well.
The website is Dr. Oz, spell out Dr. DOCTOR Oz.com, because you're still overmatched. You had a great quarter, but Democrats think this is their one takeaway opportunity left because Ron Johnson has surged and they're now on the defense.
Well, it's amazing that a lot of Democrats, and particularly far-left liberals, it's not really the Democrats in general, the conservative Democrats that actually will be getting votes from here in Pennsylvania, but a lot of the far-left Democrats living on the coast, California and New York, are of the belief Fetterman's fine. He just wants, they want the 51st seat to be a Democratic seat. The risk here is that he's actually a danger in ways that go beyond just Pennsylvania. His first decision he'll make, he says, is to get rid of the filibuster, which I think is a problem for all of us, Democrats, Republicans, independents, because it would make the country sway from side to side much more aggressively. And we want the Senate to be and remain the greatest deliberative body in the world, and it needs to be able to temper some of the decisions made by the executive branch and the like. And you can't do that if you get rid of the filibuster. But he's got a lot of other stuff going on.
Let me bring up last night, Dr. Oz. He went on MSNBC, his safe space. It's the only place he gives an interview. And he said a rather incoherent sentence to Joy Reid. I want to unpack it with you. But this is John Fetterman last night making claims about Braddock, which are inconsistent with results. Cut number 14, please,
it's absurd. And it's the Oz rule. You know, when he's on TV, he's lying. And he lies about my record on crime, but the truth is that we in Braddock, as mayor, in a community with significant gun violence issues, I ran to be mayor for that reason, and for 5.5 years, we stopped the killing and the gun violence. We stopped it, and that has never been accomplished before or since I was time as mayor. I run on my record, and the tattoos were all really just about dates. I was at the scene of any single murder as mayor, and it was a deeply personal issue. And I ran on that issue, and I was able to stop it. And for 5.5 years, and Dr. Oz has used to lie on TV about it.
Dr. Oz, that doesn't make sense. I think he's saying he got a tattoo every time someone was murdered in Braddock when he was mayor, but I'm not sure. What do you think about his comments about you and about Braddock and about his tattoos?
I can't follow it either. I haven't been saying this, but I know others have uncovered the fact that one of the tattoos in his arm says, "I will make you hurt." It's the tattoo that's covered. And I think that's probably what he's referring to, but I can't tell. These aren't even issues that I follow because I'm trying to focus on the kitchen table problems faced by Pennsylvanians. Now, the concerns about crime are real because many in Pennsylvania were already concerned about Fetterman not understanding what cops have to do to get their job done. He's undermined them. That's the reason that the Fraternal Order of Police have been across the Commonwealth endorsing me. I was up in Scranton yesterday, the northeast part of the state, where they supported me. I have a statewide endorsement, and they do it unanimously. They really dislike John Fetterman because he's been undermining them. And some of the things he said, wanting to release 1/3 of all prisoners, a passion for getting criminals sentenced to life in prison for murder out of jail. When he was asked if you could wave a magic wand, what's the one thing you would do? And he said, get rid of life sentences. And I'm thinking, my goodness, what about the victims? Why do you always protect the criminal over the innocent? This is a message when we send to folks, especially in places like Philadelphia, where we have the highest murder rate ever. We had our 1,000th carjacking over the weekend. People can't fathom this. How can you not take care of people who aren't even comfortable walking to work anymore? And yet you're out there pontificating on Twitter, usually in 140-character messages about how you want to get all these murderers out of jail. And it's a problem also because of the lawlessness with drugs in Pennsylvania.
Before I switch over to inflation, did the debate come together? Is there going to be a debate even with even with John Fetterman's unusual rules, Dr. Oz?
I'm hopeful. The 25th of October is the date that we've all agreed on. I agreed to 7 debates. You should know. 7. I mean, I would do MSNBC debates just to get him to talk to me. He has not talked to anybody on the campaign trail. The voters, the press, in a press conference setting. He'll do these very isolated events like last night's interview, but he won't do typical campaigning events. So we finally got him to agree to one late debate at the end of October. It's shortened. He wants closed captioning, but whatever it takes to get him to talk to me about the actual issues that are plaguing Pennsylvanians, like the economy, I'll do, because he can't defend his radical left positions.
No, I want to talk to you about both inflation and education. I want to start with the Wall Street Journal lead editorial today. It's about Illinois, but it applies to Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and other inner city school systems as well. Statewide in 2019, 36% of all third graders could read at grade level. That's an F, and that's the good news. That's Illinois. I imagine local public education is in the same hole in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, Dr. Oz. It's not a federal issue, it's a local issue, but how often does it come up, the collapse of public schools, on your campaigning?
Comes up frequently. It's a major problem, especially for children at risk, moms who are just barely holding it together, don't have the financial resources to pick better schools for their children. My opponent, of course, is strongly endorsed by the teachers union, does not want charter schools, but I feel passionately that we need more charter schools. And we also, I believe, need to create a fund at the federal level to squeeze and push states to allow parents to choose parochial schools for their children. I'll give you an example. The Archdiocese here in Philadelphia had 32,000 K-8 kids in school. It costs about $4,000 to educate one of these children, right? So that's fantastic. It's inexpensive. All these kids read at grade level pretty much. They're taught values, civics. It's important. I would argue we should double that. And the Archdiocese agrees. They could take twice as many kids. Why wouldn't we provide stipends to help parents who don't have the means to get their kids educated in a way that those children can enjoy the land of plenty, the land of opportunity, which America has always represented. That's the kind of topic that I would push for as a U.S. Senator. I can't get my opponent, Fetterman, to talk about these kinds of serious issues. He's busy, making the kinds of statements you just highlighted.
Oh, the Fetterman campaign is just hoping that Twitter is somehow the real world. It's not. Dr. Oz, let's close with inflation because the numbers will come out right before the election. Gas prices in California are back above $6 a gallon. J.D. Vance told me last hour he saw $4 a gallon in Ohio. I don't know what they are in Pennsylvania, but the second wave of gas hikes are coming on top of the inflation in food. I can't imagine Democrats winning in this environment. They unleashed this tsunami of rising prices.
They did it despite warnings that it would happen. They've allocated $5 trillion of our children's money to different social spending programs, which have also destroyed some of the workforce enthusiasm. And we haven't even spent all $5 trillion. We have $2 trillion left to spend. More money chasing the same goods is going to create more inflation. So we're going to see a continued increase in the cost of groceries and foods and energy. It's not just gasoline. It's energy to heat your home. And people are paying that money right now in order to fill up their tanks so they're ready for the winter, and they're not happy about it. But I think there's a bigger issue here. It causes a big-time emotional stress that leads to physical problems as well. We don't talk about this part of the economic downturn, but you make people sick when you take away their livelihood, when you take away their confidence that they can control their destiny. When they're trying to make ends meet and nothing seems to get them there, they feel hopeless. Nihilism takes over. And that's not what America's ever been about. I was in North Philly doing a prayer vigil with pastors over these horrible murders and drug deaths, and one of the pastors said, "It is easier for me to buy fentanyl than baby formula. I can walk right down the corner here and get fentanyl from a park. You have to leave Philadelphia to get baby formula." That's shocking. It's not right. It's not fair. And we have an obligation to treat all Americans better by fixing this.
Dr. Oz, spell out droz.com. That's his website. The danger of a good fundraising quarter is that people think you've got enough money, Dr. Oz. That's never the case in the closing 5 weeks.
We desperately need more support to keep up with the Democrats. I don't need as much money as they have because you need more money to sell a candidate that's not very good, which is what they stuck with. But we have to raise money. droz.com. Any support's welcome.
Dr. Oz, spell out doctor, you Steelers fans, DOCTOR, droz.com. I'll be right back, America. Thank you, Dr. Colleague Eric Metaxas, who hosts his daily radio show on many of these same stations. Good morning, Eric, and congratulations on the publication of this, a book you might recognize, A Letter to the American Church. It just came out. It's $203 on Amazon. We'll get that up there. Good morning, Eric. How are you?
It's always great to be with you, my friend. Thanks for having me.
Well, Eric, let's start by talking about Letter to the American Church. Give the synopsis before I begin to go through my notes with you.
It's actually very simple, painfully simple, and I wish I were wrong. But my thesis is that the silence of the American church today parallels dramatically the silence of the German church in the 1930s. In the 30s, the German church was silent in the face of evil. They had all kinds of theological excuses for not addressing the evils that were rising all around them. They remained silent. By the time they understood the horror of what had been unleashed and thought they might speak up, it was too late. And the results are historical nightmare. It's my contention in the book that the silence of the American church has opened the door to similar things, and you never realize it at the time. Otherwise, you would speak up. So this is a cri de coeur. This is really a very urgent message, specifically to Christians. Usually my books I write for everyone. This is specifically for Christians. If you, and particularly Christian leaders, do not speak up against the host of evils that are happening around us now, God considers us guilty. It is our job to be the conscience of the state, to speak fearlessly. That's not been happening, and we are reaping and will reap the whirlwind.
Now, Eric Metaxas' book, Letter to the American Church, I say it 7 times, Eric, because Frank Luntz has taught me well, Letter to the American Church, has got blurbs on it from a couple of my friends, Mike Youssef and Wayne Grudem, other influencers like Erwin Lutzer. But I've got to say, there aren't any Catholics on this. Now, you're talking to a Catholic, Eric, and as we speak, we are being listened to by Archbishop Chaput, whose previous books, Render Unto Caesar and Things Worth Dying For, very much mirror your concerns that Catholic Christians especially speak out and never give up the fight. We just won the abortion battle after 50 plus years. What shouldn't this be letter to the evangelical Protestant church? Because Catholics are doing our job.
Well, okay, first of all, that's rank nonsense, and you're just trying to gig me by even saying that. Most Catholics, most Catholic bishops and archbishops have been shamefully, disgracefully silent. When you talk about a hero like Archbishop Chaput, he is the outlier, Vigano. The few that have been speaking up are absolutely vilified by most of those who disagree with them and who wish they would shut up. The case is exactly similar in the evangelical church. And I'll tell you this, something, Hugh. Basically, this is a letter mainly to the evangelicals because I'm not officially Catholic, but as you know, I'm a very pro-Catholic, non-Catholic. But this is to anyone who would call himself a Christian. Christian leaders have been scandalously, shamefully silent on a variety of issues. They say things like, well, it's not our job to be political. That is a lie from the pit of hell. When the
Now, Eric, I've got to just correct you. I'm not trying to gig you. I'm speaking up for Archbishop Gomez, Archbishop Cordelone in San Francisco, not Archbishop
Ship. Handful of heroes like you just mentioned. This is not.
It's not a tiny handful. I mean, the Catholics have been keeping up the abortion battle for 50 years, and we won. So I'm just curious why the Alliance Defending Freedom has never backed up. So shouldn't this be a letter to some evangelical pastors who have forgotten their job?
Well, first of all, basically, yes, you're correct. Basically, this is a letter to evangelical leaders mostly. But when I say letter to the American church, I say anyone who considers himself a Christian ought to understand it is your job and your duty to speak to all of the issues in the culture, to pretend that I'm supposed to just stay in my little theological lane, just supposed to worry about evangelism. That is rank nonsense. And it led the German church to be silent in the face of evil. It's the same thing. Whether it's some Catholics or mostly Protestants, the point is we know who we are. Whoever you are, it is your duty. God appoints you to speak bravely and heroically against every kind of madness, whether it's cultural Marxism, transgenderism, whatever it is, and to call out politicians who have been guilty. But many in the church say, well, I can't be political. Listen, that is simply not right. Wilberforce, my hero, spoke against the transatlantic slave trade, was incredibly political because that's part of what you have to do to abolish an abomination like the slave trade. But there were many people in his day saying, no, you can't speak about that. That's just your private religion. Keep it out of politics. Keep politics out of faith. That is what has led us to where we are today. When there is evil happening, and you're quite right, of course, when you're talking about the abortion issue, but how many people still today, they didn't want to be vocal to applaud the overturn of this joke of a law called Roe v. Wade, not just because it's immoral, because it was horrible law. You still have people being silent thinking, well, I don't really want to be perceived as somehow political by taking a side on this or this. And it's my contention in the book that we are where we are now, and this is only the beginning of horrors, if we do not begin to speak up and act up and do what we can. Not for ourselves, Hugh. Not for ourselves. People say, oh, this is about Judeo-Christian values. The whole point of Judeo-Christian values is that if you bring them into a culture, it blesses everyone. It blesses every atheist and every Buddhist and every Muslim. If you believe in certain things and you bring it into the public square. So we're responsible for our neighbors. We're responsible for the Uyghur Muslims being murdered for their organs in China. We have to speak up. If the church is silent, the entire culture dies. That's what we're
And,
seeing.
you know, I would have addressed this to every board considering ESG because the environmental, because it's all ignoring the Uyghurs. So it can go to every corporate board. I want to make sure people who listen to this show and who give faithfully to Alliance Defending Freedom and Food for the Poor and whose hearts are on their sleeves and who listen with concern for their brothers who are different colors of the kingdom don't feel pointed out by you. It's not about them.
No. Look, I have a show on Salem, and it's the same thing. Of course, the people who are giving to Alliance Defending Freedom are heroes. The folks at Alliance Defending Freedom are heroes. All of those folks, this is not addressed to the people who are not being silent. This is being addressed to people who are not only being silent, but in some cases, there's a horrific book that was put out some months ago by Andy Stanley, very prominent pastor, advocating silence, advocating not being political in any way. And I thought to myself, this is theologically confused and wrong. It's historically confused and wrong, and it is misleading millions. And there are many voices in the evangelical church who are very happy to take these excuses and say, okay, I guess I don't need to address this from the pulpit. I guess I can kind of, pretend that I'm in the middle someplace. But when you're dealing with cultural Marxism and that kind of evil that's harming young women, transgender madness, if you are silent, God will hold you accountable. And we've got tons of people that are either advocating silence or advocating some kind of false neutrality. My friend Tim Keller has done the same thing. And what he says today, it applied 20 years ago. It made perfect sense. The world has changed so dramatically, and we need to understand where we are now.
I know you're passionate about this, and I want to make sure people understand you come from an area of deep learning on Bonhoeffer. You cite his 32 radio address. You cite his famous essay on the Jewish question. You cite his return to Germany. You cite the courage of Bonhoeffer. Nobody needs the courage of Bonhoeffer in America. You might lose your church if you speak up. You might lose some people from the pews, but you're not going to be persecuted in America. I want to ask you about the successes out there. Who do you think has done it right? Like Al Mohler has done it right, in my humble opinion. I think Al Mohler, I don't know Andy Stanley I wouldn't know him if I bumped into him on a subway.
Well, But listen, the Andy Stanley book, as much of a mess as it is, I want to be really clear. There were good German pastors and Christians who got it wrong in the 30s. So the point is not to demonize people who are being silent. It's to say that if you're drifting along with these voices being silent now, it's no different than it was then. There were good people who said, you know what? We're not ready to speak up yet. We don't want to alienate somebody in our congregation. We think it's time for us to sort of play the middle. The fact of the matter is, Martin Niemöller, one of the great heroes of World War I, he had a huge church in Germany. He was silent. He was convinced somehow, you know what, let's be careful. Eventually, Hitler will see it our way. When he finally understood that the Nazis wanted to neutralize the church, sneered at the church, and thought if we can only get them to shut up for a little while, eventually we will have the power to crush them. When Niemöller understood that, a good man, Niemöller, he realized it's too late. He began to speak up. He was arrested. He was in concentration camps for the 8 years of the whole war. So there are good men out there who have been fooled by bad theology. In the book, Letter to the American Church, I go into the bad theology. What are the reasons?
Very well. But Eric, I got to close with one question. What is the threat that you see today that is equivalent to Hitlerism, Nazism, and the decimation of the Jews, the Gypsies, and other unwanted people, including the Slavs? 6 million people. What do you see that is remotely like that in America today, other than abortion, which has now been put back to the states?
But that's the whole point, Hugh. In 1935, no German could even conceive of the Holocaust. In other words, the point is that you don't know. You have to address things as they come. And the silence of those in 1935 opened the door not just to the Holocaust, but to a variety of horrors that were absolutely inconceivable to good Germans who thought, let's just keep our nose down. Let's not be political. Let's preach.
What's on the other side of what's on the other side of the door in America, Eric? Because I don't think it's going to be concentration camps. I don't think it's going to be Uyghur-like persecution. What do you see?
The demonization of Jews in Germany is like the demonization of people of faith today. Where it's going to go, how hard it's going to get, we don't know. But if you have a biblical view of sexuality, if you speak out against the transgender madness, on any of these things, people are now being harshly demonized and canceled. My YouTube program was completely wiped out because I dared to have on a few guests that talked about some things. In other words, it's the harshness of the cancel culture that gives us a hint that those on the other side are not playing fair. They want to crush the opposition. If you do not speak now while you have a voice, you are going along with the evil. And where it leads, frankly, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see where it's going to go. We don't know. Just as the Germans in the mid-30s thought, well, how bad can it get? They had no idea. And what I say in Letter to the American Church is we are in precisely the same position for many reasons, not one reason. And the silence of folks, the book that I mentioned by Andy Stanley that advocates this kind of preposterous neutrality, political neutrality, it got a fulsome blurb, a big blurb from Jim Daly of Focus on the Family. Somebody I think
Jim was my guest this morning. Let's leave him out of it. I love Jim Daly. I love Focus on the Family.
That's
But
kind of my point, is that these are good people. These are not wicked villains. These are good people who've been persuaded to kind of sit back and let the other hotheads put this out. I'm going to be
Eric, I can't take you longer. I would argue about Focus on the Family forever. But a letter to the American churches and bookstores now. Go and get it. Thank you, Eric. I'll be right back.